Most people picture Al Capone as the untouchable king of Chicago, smoking cigars in a silk suit. But the real story isn't about the guns. It's about a tiny bacterium that ate his brain alive. You think you know the legend of Scarface, but I guarantee you have never heard the humiliating truth. It starts in the Roaring '20s, where this Brooklyn bouncer turned Chicago into his private kingdom. By 1927, Al Capone was raking in over $100 million a year from illegal booze and gambling. That is nearly $1.5 billion in today's money, all cash and completely tax-free. He bought the police, he bought the judges, and he even opened soup kitchens to charm the public. But behind the smile, he was a monster who ordered the St. Valentine's Day Massacre in February 1929. 7 rivals were lined up against a garage wall and shredded by Tommy guns in a pool of blood. The photos were so gruesome that the public finally turned against their favorite celebrity gangster. President Herbert Hoover was furious and personally ordered his Treasury agents to get Capone at all costs. Enter Frank Wilson, a quiet accountant with round glasses who looked more like a librarian than a hero. Wilson knew he couldn't catch Capone for murder because the witnesses always vanished or turned up dead. So he decided to hunt for the one thing Capone couldn't hide, the millions of dollars in spending. Frank Wilson spent 3 years combing through 2 million documents, looking for a single mistake. He practically lived in the office, sleeping on a cot, terrified that Capone's hitmen would find him. Then, in a dusty storage room, he found a forgotten ledger from a gambling den seized years ago. One line in that book changed history. Frank paid $17,500 for Al. That tiny entry was the smoking gun that proved Capone was receiving income he never reported. But Capone wasn't ready to give up. He had a plan to bribe the entire jury for his upcoming trial. He spent thousands of dollars ensuring every single juror was on his payroll before the trial began. But the judge, James Wilkerson, pulled a move that absolutely shocked the gangster on the first day. Judge Wilkerson swapped the entire jury panel with another judge down the hall at the very last second. Capone's face turned white as he realized his money was useless and he was actually going to lose. On October 24, 1931, the King of Chicago was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison for tax evasion. He thought he would run the prison like a hotel, but he was sent to the Rock, the infamous Alcatraz. And this is where the story gets dark, because Capone had been hiding a dirty secret for years. Years earlier, he had contracted syphilis from a prostitute and was too ashamed to get it treated. By the time he reached Alcatraz, the disease had entered its final deadly stage, known as neurosyphilis. The bacteria were literally eating holes in his brain, causing hallucinations and severe memory loss. The toughest gangster in America was reduced to a confused man who was terrified to leave his cell. Other inmates bullied him, calling him the wop with the mop as he cleaned the prison latrines. He was once stabbed in the back with a pair of shears by another inmate and didn't even fight back. By 1938, doctors confirmed that Al Capone had the mental capacity of a 12-year-old child. His family begged for his release, and the government finally let him go because he was no threat. He retired to his mansion in Florida, but he wasn't the man who once ruled the Chicago underworld. He spent his days fishing in his swimming pool, talking to people who had been dead for decades. His wife May protected him, keeping the press away so they wouldn't see the king drooling on himself. It is a tragic irony that the man who controlled a billion-dollar empire lost control of his own mind. He was one of the first patients to receive penicillin, but by 1945, the damage was irreversible. The syphilis had destroyed his nervous system, leaving him prone to violent seizures and strokes. On January 21, 1947, he suffered a massive stroke that signaled the end of his tortured life. 3 days later, he went into cardiac arrest, surrounded by the family he could barely recognize. Al Capone died on January 25, 1947, not in a hail of bullets, but in a quiet, delirious whimper. His death certificate lists apoplexy and pneumonia, but we know it was his past coming back to haunt him. Capone's life proves that you can dodge the police and the rivals, but you cannot outrun biology. He left a legacy of blood and gold, but paid for it with his sanity in the most brutal way possible. It is a masterclass in how fragile power really is when you ignore the small details that matter. Next time you see a movie about Scarface, remember the sad, broken man fishing in his own pool. Smash that subscribe button right now if you want us to expose more hidden secrets of history's villains.